Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto manga review. This one is going to be for Chapter 60, which is called A Place to Belong. Interestingly, we get a demon color page here to start us off, so nice to see what his design is like, I suppose, in color. They do tend to not maybe represent the colors the best in these, so, you know, it's a representation. It likely is his accurate color scheme, but we'll see, I suppose, when he makes his anime debut. But, yeah, interesting chapter this time out, because when I saw some of the initial sort of leaks, or spoilers before the chapter officially went live, I wasn't particularly impressed by what I was hearing this chapter was going to be about. Thankfully, actually reading it in full here, having full context for the chapter, it reads a lot better than I suppose it reads sort of in summary. But I still think Boruto is in a very weird spot at the moment with pacing, and obviously in general that has been a problem, at least for me. I know other people have not as many problems with that, but to me Boruto can at times struggle in the pacing department. Most of the time I feel it's been in the middle of some of the bigger fights actually. And not every big fight, in that I think the Ishiki fight, a lot of the more recent fights have actually been okay, but say stuff like the Delta fight in the manga, I thought that was kind of pace not too great. I actually have felt that Boruto typically, when it's doing more of these transition character setup chapters, has been where it's at its strongest because they're developing Kawaki really well, who is one of the strongest characters in the series. I think the problem that we've had during this sort of post-Ishiki group of chapters, basically the last volume and then this is the start of a new volume, is that it's one of the longer sequences of setup chapters that we've ever had in Boruto. And it really feels like at this point, 5 chapters into that setup, the manga is just in this spinning its wheels phase where stuff is happening in each chapter, but for the most part, the character development isn't really moving forward all that much. The plot definitely isn't moving forward as much as it probably should be. Because again, when I say 5 chapters, you may be mainly thinking about other manga, but Boruto's a monthly manga, so that's 5 months. That is effectively, 6 months worth of content, because we have a month until the next chapter. So that's like half a year's nearly worth of content where we've spent just in this post-Ishiki fight arc setting up what's happening next very, very slowly. Another way of looking at that is that is 200 pages of content. And has it felt like 200 pages? I don't think it has in terms of what has actually happened here. We've been introduced to Ada, we've been introduced to Demon, and we've set up this like Kawaki arc of like will he, won't he get the karma mark back. We did a few things about like the ninja training, what approach they're going to take, not that they've come back to it in a while. But some of the main takeaways have really been that like Boruto really hasn't been too much of a focus. He's felt kind of sidelined. A lot of the other characters like Sarada haven't really been in focus much. And so it's kind of been the Kawaki show for a while. And that's fine, because he is an interesting character, a strong character. They're still in the middle of doing this, setup arc of him really growing to really care about, basically his new family here and feel like a citizen of Konoha. Which is good, given, I suppose, that they're eventually going to have to build to something happening and Kawaki turning on everyone, how, why, the situation surrounding why that happens, to eventually get us to Boruto Chapter 1. But I do think there should be some sense of, you can't go this many chapters of a monthly manga in a row, doing so little with the amount of content that you actually have. The problem with this chapter, I think, it's a volume opener. So straight away, a lot of what it's going to be doing is, I think, more or less set up for the end of this volume. It is my opinion that, to me, they have to have something kind of big happen by the end of this volume. So within the next, I suppose, 3 chapters following this, so 61, 62, and 63, which will bring this volume to an end, you have to finally, I think, commit to whatever's happening. And that whether that be Amado revealing what his plan is, Code making his move, doing the time skip if you want to do it now, or something else happening. It has to happen now, because otherwise we are then looking at, theoretically, a full year worth of manga content just setting up what's happening next. And I think that's a bit extreme. I already feel like in the writing department they're in full on stretch things out as much as you can mode, which I think is kind of hard to argue against that is not the case. We need to get to the show a little bit here. But we'll get into it, the content here. So we start off with, surprisingly, what I feel is actually one of the more interesting parts of this chapter, the opening 2 pages here of Shikamaru, Sai, and so on, talking about there's Code claw marks outside the village, and that also these same marks are basically outside all of the 5 great ninja villages. And obviously they know that Code can travel to these instantaneously. It's a form of like instantaneous travel. So they're sort of speculating about, okay, this is Code sending us the message that I can appear right next to your village at any point that I want. He's not entering the village, but he's making it clear that here is a marking that will let you know I can appear right where you are at any point. And he's saying that to all of the villages. And they're kind of wondering, like, is this a way for him to, with very little effort, just distract everyone, cause them to, split their forces so he's able to, attack whenever anywhere is vulnerable? What's going on? So it's really interesting, the setup here. They're just going to continue to monitor it, and Shikamaru just hopes that he stays holed up with the 10 tails, which looks to be roughly what the kind of plan is. Obviously, I think from last chapter or the chapter before, they said that they're going to wait until they see a clear-cut moment to strike. So they at least have clarified, I suppose, that they're not going to charge in against a fully, armed up, ready to fight ninja village. They're going to wait until there's a major distraction and they can get in there without, too much hassle. So what's going to cause that issue? This at least is maybe potentially creating a bit of an opening. But anyway, we move from that to Kawaki sitting on top of the Hokage monument. He's looking out across the village, but notices that, of course, he's being watched. There's a few ninja nearby who are, casually keeping an eye on him. And it's just meant to get across this idea of Kawaki, in general, is beginning to feel at home in the village, but it's stuff like that, suspicion from a Shikamaru, and the fact that he always is under supervision and surveillance, that makes him feel like, I'm not truly at home here, am I? Given what's going on. So that's kind of interesting. And this is going to be this moment of, he's going to feel like, do I actually have a place in this village? And make a decision on that. And that's what I actually say about this chapter in terms of why I'm not coming on here and just, I think, completely being like, nothing happened here, is that I actually do like this little arc that, in a way, just this chapter kind of covers. Now, we'll see what he plans to do in the following chapter based on the cliffhanger ending here, but we'll get to it. So then we switch over to Sumire and Amado. So this is the big plot point from the end of the last chapter that we were wondering about. So this was a volume-ending cliffhanger, tease. Amado is basically saying, Sumire, you're pushing too far. You're stupid for pushing this far, as if I'm about to now reveal something to you and take you out of the picture or something like that. We were kind of worried about Sumire, that Amado's going to reveal something here. So what we get here is, please explain it to me what you plan to have Kawaki do once you've restored his karma. So all he says is, I'm not trying to keep it under wraps, but it's a personal matter. I'll discuss it with Kawaki, but frankly, I'd rather not share it with you. But I assure you that your fears are baseless. I've zero intention of doing Konoha wrong. I swear. And we get some reactions from Sumire here of like, okay. As she then glances over at this pod where there's something in it, some noises happening here. And so she asks, what work are you doing right now? And what is in this container? Could you leave, Kake? I'm actually quite busy. You can't tell me? I just told you I won't do wrong by Konoha. The opposite, in fact. Huh? I've already run this by Katasuke. After all, sharing tech with your village was a condition of my borrowing equipment. This one should become a powerful Konoha ally. A powerful ally? As we sort of zoom in a little bit on the kind of window around where the face is, and we just get a slight look that if it is a person or a cyborg, they've got some quite big hair, I guess. So no real insight immediately just from the shape there that I can immediately make out. So, but if we are going to be primarily fighting cyborg-like, opponents, like Ada, Demon, and so on, modified characters by Amado, that now that he's allied with Konoha, it makes sense that Konoha would also have the ability to produce cyborgs as well. Now, the question in the past, and obviously the connection here, is that typically the dynamic that we have is that these are humans who've been modified to become cyborgs. They're not fully artificial creations. So if this is the same type of thing, who has been modified by Amado to become one of these cyborgs? And, what's going on there? So that's at least a nice tease that, okay, we're introducing all these cyborgs, but bit of a twist, here's a cyborg we're actually going to be allied with. I didn't expect that to be the case, because we have quite a few, hero characters on our side. So what are they going to do with this new one? So, they're setting it up right here, ally, they say it a few times. So that's actually quite interesting in terms of a tease I'm actually interested in seeing pay off. Then we cut over to Code and Ada. This, to me, is probably the section of the chapter that feels the most like it's just very little's happening here. This is just more of the same with these guys, that you are not ready for some reason yet to announce what they're doing, but you want to keep them in everyone's mind until you finally decide to commit to what they're doing. So it's just, Demon wants to ride on Code like they did before. Ada takes this as like they've become best friends. So then we get Demon spots Bug trying to kind of escape. He hops on top of him and he gets really angry at him. And then Code sort of tests Demon out by like putting his claw marks next to him and basically taking Bug back through them. And he notes that, Code notes that the reflection is instantaneous, and given his reaction just now, does the ability kick in automatically regardless of intent? And so there's a bit of a like, what's going on here? And Ada's just watching on. Code explains that, this is my ability, I can move freely between my claw marks. I thought it'd be quicker to show you than explain. He pulls Bug through and says that while it only allows me to go back and forth at will, I can bring others to me if it's one at a time. So that is something that he can do. Just, it speaks to the idea that he can sort of pull someone through who is like on one of his claw marks. So I'm guessing that's what the setup is here for, is just to get across that, like, if you go too near the claw marks, and I suppose because he either can sense through the claw marks themselves or just through Ada letting him know, since she can see everything, she knows who's near the claw marks. He can just pull anyone through who tries to investigate his claw marks. So that's a pretty dangerous ability, in that if Kawaki or Naruto or Boruto go basically stand on a claw mark, he can just pull them through. That, I think that's what they're sort of getting across here, is that if we get the wrong people investigating what he's put out there, he can really pull them into an awkward situation. So there's that. Code literally says, I was checking out his reflecting ability, and he's like, hey Damon, can you tell me a little bit more how your ability works? And he's about to say exactly how it works, and he's like, well, you see, but Ada's like, shh, you shouldn't reveal your cards so readily. And so she's just like, I told you. He reflects attacks, that's all you need to know, at least for the time being. And she just says, don't take offense, Code. We only just met, you know. More time needs to pass before I can show you everything. And so he's like, oh, so you're saying you have more abilities than Bedazzlement and the Senrigan. He's like, oh, I assumed that was everything, but of course there must be more to you. So yeah, they're clearly suggesting she has some other sort of ability. And she's just like, well, wouldn't that be interesting? So she's already said that she isn't a fighter outside of taijutsu, so whatever ability she has, on top of those already 2 very powerful abilities, that seems quite incredible. So anyway, we cut to Kawaki in a shop to buy some food. Again, everyone is sort of looking at him, sort of suspicious of him. He remembers what happened with the scene with Shikada in the last chapter, that, you know, the people around you, like, they know kind of like half-truths about you, that there's rumors going around, true and false, so they kind of half know what's going on with you, so that explains why, you know, people are going to stare at you. He flashes to Jigen, explaining that, you know, wake up already, can't you see that you're just being used? There's no place for you here. And the idea here is that he begins to realize that that might actually be the case. So this is where we then cut to what's going on here? What's this panel? Yeah, I just realized that I completely skipped over this in the previous one, but just this random panel with the dot, which I guess is meant to be some sort of okay. I get what it is now. The idea is that I guess this is Boruto throwing one of his pills into the air to eat it. It's just not visually shown too well, but anyway, I got that. He mentions that he's taken 2 a day for a week, and he's seen no change, good or bad, and he has no idea if they're actually working or not. Hinata then asks, you know, where's Kawaki? He hasn't come home yet. He's never missed dinner before. So we see Kawaki up on top of the Hokage monument. He has a bottle of water and 1 rice ball, which is what he bought. And Naruto comes up to meet him on top of the monument, and they have a conversation of just like, that's your dinner? Like, water and a rice ball? And he's like, Hinata's made dinner by now. You should come home and have it. He tries to make up an excuse for why he's actually not doing it, but it's clear that there's another reason there. So he says, I really like this spot. It's out of character for me, but I like the view from here. To gaze down upon the village that you protect. But there ain't a place for me anywhere within this village. It's no one's fault. I'm a troublesome outsider who wandered into this trouble-free, peaceful place. To be honest, I was really cocky. I can laugh at myself now. Jigen was right. I mean Ishiki, whichever. And he's about to basically go on about the idea of like, he was right, I don't belong in the village. But Naruto just grabs him, like picks him up and is just like, let me down. And he's like, Jigen, Ishiki, who cares? I certainly don't. We're going home, my stupid son. So he directly refers to Kawaki as his son here. Very kind of key moment in this, in that you can tell just by the way they show it here, especially the panel with the focus on the eyes here, that, you know, this is a pretty intense reaction here of like, he's been looking for, you know, a proper father figure, and here he has finally got it. Like, someone who just is like, you're having all of these doubts, throw them away. We're going home. This is your home. And he comes home and sees everyone waiting for him, and they're all like, oh, like, welcome home, like, you're late, you know, what's going on? Like, they missed him. They're surprised he isn't here. And it's this sort of counterpoint to everything he's seen so far in the chapter, that, okay, you go out here, the people look at you a bit weird, you're being surveilled all the time. But you come home to the Uzumaki house and everyone's like, you're part of the family now. So really interesting kind of contrast here. Like, you've been living with us for a while now, but it's been so hectic, we've never had a chance to throw you a welcoming party. And here it is, and they get the big dinner here with the vase, the famous vase, cracked but useful again, in the center of the table here. You know, sit down, we've been waiting so long for this. So he asks, why are you using the broken vase when you could just have a new one? And Himawari says, but I chose to use it. This vase has become even more precious to me now. It's fine. So that's cool. And Boruto's like, I have something to give you, but, you know, you're being all weird, so I'm not going to give it to you. But he's like, no, okay, here it is. And so Boruto gives Kawaki his own headband. So Boruto's been using Sasuke's one, so his own personal one that he got from the academy, he gives this to Kawaki. So this is an interesting kind of point here. And he's like, oh, but I'm not a shinobi, you know, I don't get one of these. But he just says, you started your shinobi training, you're a ninja in progress. Everyone on the team, including Sarada and Mitsuki, would agree with this. You know, think of this as just a formality. Hold on to it, you know, like I'm holding on to Sasuke's one. It'll be fine. You know, when you become a ninja yourself and get your own one, you can give it back to me. So that's the sort of setup here. Naruto actually likes this idea, and they're like, try it on. And so we get Kawaki wearing the headband. I actually think it looks pretty cool. It's actually a cool look with him. But Boruto's like, no, it doesn't suit you at all. The others actually really like it, but Boruto's like, no. He then puts it then and sort of wears it around his neck, and Himawari's like, other people wear it around their neck as well. Maybe that's the style for you. So he's trying to decide on what exact way he's going to wear it. And so as he's going to sleep, I suppose that night, he has another conversation with Naruto, and he says, your place is here. My family thinks so at the very least. You can stay with us for as long as you want. But if you just can't feel the same, then I failed my job as Hokage. Sorry. The search for Code is rough, but don't worry, we'll find him. You can leave that to us. Because this is Konoha. It's a place where anyone, even someone like you, can live at ease, or else there is no point in me becoming Hokage. And so, you know, we're just left with kind of Kawaki pondering these words from Naruto and just getting a even deeper understanding of like what Naruto is doing with Kawaki here is just an example of what he overall wants the village to be. It's just this place where anyone can come to and live happily and at ease, and that's his kind of dream as Hokage overall, which is nice to kind of know and nice for him to state. Then, bit of an interesting one here. We get Boruto asleep, trying to go to sleep. We get a cut to the jar of pills. He then looks at the karma on his hand, and then we get a ... kind of thinking panel. I'm not sure what they're going for here in terms of like, is Boruto just like, it feels like it's just he's waiting for something to happen, or has a side effect started to happen now, or like can he not feel the karma anymore, or is his vision starting to go looking at his hand or something like that? I'm not sure what point they're really trying to make there. But anyway, we get some more reflection from Kawaki here. He picks up the headband and he says, Konoha, is this the place I belong? He remembers what Amado said, so take it for yourself. Brand new power in the form of a karma that's purely a weapon. And he says, give me a break. I don't need no karma. There's still one thing that I can do to protect Konoha and Lord Seventh. So what is this thing? What can he do? The visuals don't really give us much of a sense for what exactly he feels he can do. But it doesn't seem to involve assuming this power that Amado is offering him. But there is still something he can do. What is that? So the big question here is like, okay, what's going to happen here? Is Kawaki going to leave the village or something like that to try and, you know, feel like the village can be secure in some way? That, you know, he like hopes that this can be resolved and he can return someday, but for now he's going to leave to help protect it in some way. Are we quite there yet? I'm not sure. Again, it's a more of a tease for the future, and that's a lot of what this kind of chapter was. Of it's just, well, a tease of there's more to Ada, there's more to Demon. Kawaki is about to do something that we don't really know about. We might finally get around to seeing how the pills are affecting Boruto after all these chapters. Amado is telling us once again that he has Konoha's best interest at heart, and that he's not against Konoha. In fact, it's the opposite. He's doing everything for Konoha. And it seems like we're going to get an allied cyborg character on our side here. But there's still a bit of a tease that there's something specifically that's very personal that he wants to talk about with Kawaki that he doesn't want anyone else to know about. what's that about? But does it take any of the suspicion away from Amado? Not especially, because there's still the fundamental thing of how are you the best scientist in like the entire world? That your tech and what you're able to do to these characters, giving them all these wild powers. How is that even possible? Given that we have all these other amazing scientists who don't seem anywhere near in the same range as he is. Who is he at his core? What is the backstory here? What's his intent now that Ishiki is gone? We're dealing with the remnants of, you know, the remainder of the Kara organization. But what is the plan now going forward? There's a lot of questions that I have like that. So it's one of those things where, like, look, is this a particularly like amazing chapter? I don't think so. Is it an awful chapter? No. It's just solid. It's like to me, like a 7.5 chapter out of 10. Just because we have been doing much of the same as this chapter for a while now, and it's beginning to kind of really feel like we're just wasting time a little bit. We're just really stretching things out to reach a certain point and just keep it in this era before we get to the next fight and potentially the time skip for as long as possible. And while there's stuff I'm interested in, it's really, really clear that they are definitely not maximizing the page count to use it as well as possible, which has been probably one of my biggest issues with Boruto as a manga throughout, is that so many chapters, it just feels like this fight, you wasted time in this fight by having a whole chapter with basically nothing happening. And in these last 5 setup chapters, it's roughly the same. Of like, Boruto has now just been, taking these pills for like 3-4 chapters now, you know, a third of a year, and there's been barely any insight into it, in that he's been missing in like some of the most recent chapters. Like, he wasn't in the last chapter. He wasn't in the chapter, like, not the one before that, but the one before that he wasn't in. And the series is called Boruto. And look, I like what they're doing with Kawaki here, because ultimately he is the character who's seemingly going to change the most as we progress forward. So you need to do the development on him. But you have the page count to do, in my mind, quite a few things in each chapter, and you are not doing that really at all. Like, where's Sasuke? What's Sarada doing in the meantime? What's Mitsuki doing? Like, where are their arcs and what's going on with them? The anime, I think, is doing a bit of a better job of incorporating more of those characters in. But eventually it feels like, can we utilize like Sarada more effectively, like with regards to the development of her powers? And that, at least in the manga, the next stage for her would be Mangekyo Sharingan. But there's a lot of questions that surround how on earth that's going to work for her. Given that, like, there's a lot she doesn't know, I guess, about, you know, her father's history. There's a few things that feel like need to be explained, but she wasn't really in this chapter. So there's a few things they need to come back to here. And then, like I said, probably on the more interesting side of things, they're like the first 2 pages of like, okay, Code has put his claw marks outside each of the villages, and given what he then explains later on in the chapter about like what he can do with that, that actually seems like a pretty clever move, given that with Ada he can keep track of everything going on. So, you know, they've set up a nice sort of spy on all the villages scenario, but what are they actually hoping to accomplish? Because again, Code's plan is ultimately revenge on all the characters who were heavily involved in Ishiki's defeat. So that's the core thing, which will get across the idea that he really doesn't have much of an issue with the other ninja villages as such, but he's putting the threat on them as well. The Ten Tails thing is going to have to happen at some stage, because again, the setup is that if Code eats the chakra fruit, he will become an Otsutsuki. So that's important to remember in all of this as well. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it there, because I think this chapter, one thing it sort of has done is like, okay, there's actually a little bit more to speculate about going into the next chapter than there has been compared to the previous chapters. where it just felt like, wow, this is just like completely in the middle of some sort of an arc. Here it's like, okay, allied cyborg, that's something to think about. What is Kawaki going to do next to help protect the village? You know, there's some things that are beginning to happen here. But I think the next couple of chapters are going to be very key. I'd say especially the next two. I think the next chapter we can be relatively okay if they do something quite similar here. But the one afterwards, so chapter 62, that is going to have to be the one where they really transition away from setup and begin to actually put stuff into motion for, boom, the attack is coming or the next big event. Because we need to begin to move away from, you know, this seemingly just endless setup that we're in at the moment. So there are my thoughts on Boruto Chapter 60, the, I guess, 5-year anniversary of the series, which is an interesting milestone to hit. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.